He's built multi-million-dollar companies. His explosive books on health and wealth have sold over 60 million copies. Now, the Kevin Trudeau Show they don't want you to know.
Welcome. It's Limitless, Kevin Trudeau Show. I'm Kevin Trudeau. Thanks for joining me. We have breaking news. We are breaking a global story here on the Kevin Trudeau Show. This is the first announcement of this in any media, on any podcast, in any source, as far as I know. We are breaking this story. In order for you to be limitless, in order for you to release your abilities and go through life at cause over your environment, creating the life you want, living in joy and happiness, being able to manifest your goals, dreams, and desires, one of the things is you can't have your head in the sand. You have to be aware of what is going on around you and around the world. You have to have a high level of consciousness, which means awareness, knowingness. Ignorance is never an excuse for stupidity. If you are ignorant and keep your head in the sand, you can't have a high level of awareness and consciousness. One of the things that we've talked about, and many other people have talked about, is around the world, in the United States and around the world, in governments everywhere, there is a deep state. You've heard that the government lies to you, that politicians are manipulated by the power brokers, the lobbyists, the money. You've read in my books, and I've said it many times, other people have said it many times, that power and control and money at the highest level is what the individuals are concerned with. And it's their own power, their own control, and themselves being enriched and increasing their wealth. You don't hear about it. What you hear in the news, what you read in the newspapers and on the internet, and quite frankly, what you hear pundits talk about on podcasts around the world are sound good information. It's surface stuff. It's not what goes on behind the scenes. What goes on behind the scenes is many times radically different than what you are seeing in the news or listening to on podcasts. Many times you will have politicians look right into the camera and say these absolute statements of fact, and they are knowingly lying or just repeating what they've been told to say by the lobbyists who are giving them money. Most of the politicians are just handed a script and said, read this. They didn't write it. They don't know if anything in it is true. They just read the teleprompter, or they just read the script that they've been handed to that's been written by the lobbyists. This is how it works. And I've had past U.S. senators on my show say that that's exactly how it is. And now you never hear from those people ever again. It's like dead silence. It's kind of like, they're dead and buried. You never hear their name. It's mind-boggling what happens. We have today, in this story, 100% direct evidence. Remember, there's a difference between knowing about something and knowing something. The information you're getting here on Limitless and the Kevin Trudeau Show comes direct from sources who have been there and who know. Much of it, I have been there and I know. That's what makes this so unique and different than other type of podcasts. We have an operative, a top secret operative, effectively, an insider. He can't mention his name. His voice has to be garbled for his own personal security. He was physically in a room when something happened. And what happened is not an isolated instance. This is something that happens all around the world that's never reported on. Never. The U.S. government and other governments around the world, here's what they do. They use the legal system and they use the police for political purposes and to increase their power and control and wealth by persecuting their political opponents, or by simply stripping away from wealthy people wealth and giving it to themselves or their family members. You're not hearing this in the news. It's the deep state at work. And I have documents here in front of me. These are top secret documents. There's a highly confidential document here, which is top secret, and it says, "Your Excellency, I would like to address you regarding a sensitive matter that I would like to keep private and confidential." I can't even read this on the air. We have congressional records, which we're going to talk about in a moment. But let's bring on our operative who was physically in a room to tell you the story of what happened. And this is not an isolated incident. It's not something that just happens outside the United States. It happens in the United States. It happens in England. It happens in Germany. It happens all over the world. This man knows over 30 years experience of being there. This is just the most recent blatant example of what's happening. And you need to know what's happening so that you can increase your consciousness and awareness so you can be at cause over your environment instead of at effect, and not be powerless, but be powerful. We're empowering you with this information. I'm going to call this guy Mr. X. We'll call him Mr. X. Mr. X, are you on the phone?
Yes, Kevin, I am.
Okay. Now, I talked to you on the phone. We've known each other for many years. You're one of the people that I don't talk about a lot because there are many people like you at the highest levels around the world that are friends of mine, that we communicate, and you give me information from direct experience. You were in the United Arab Emirates in the city of Dubai recently with one of the top lawyers in the world, Mark Agnifilo. Am I pronouncing his name right?
Agnifilo, Kevin.
Agnifilo, thank you. Mark Agnifilo.
Yes.
And Mark is one of the top lawyers, criminal lawyers in the world. He's represented top people. Who are some of the people that Mark has represented? Do you know?
I do know. So he is currently representing Sean Combs, better known as P. Diddy, who is facing very serious accusations that your listeners probably know about. Him and his wife are also representing the person who is alleged to have shot the CEO of UNH. In the past, he's represented Dominic Strauss-Kahn, the former head of the IMF, and many other very important clients. I'm not exaggerating when I say that Mark is probably one of the 3 top criminal defense lawyers in the United States and the world.
Okay. You and Mark, you know each other, went to the United Arab Emirates, went to Dubai to meet a client, an individual who got a visa, a golden visa from Uzbekistan. Is that correct?
He has a Dubai golden visa. This person, this Mark's client, is a citizen of Uzbekistan, but as many people of his stature tend to do, he also has a second residency in Dubai. And as an investor in the United Arab Emirates, he was awarded the so-called golden visa, which is supposed to offer him a certain level of protection. But as we will see from the story, that's exactly what did not happen in this case.
Okay. And he's a very wealthy gentleman, correct?
Yes, this person is a very wealthy business person. He is one of the top business people in his country. What makes him different from most people in his country is that he is not a kind of rent-seeking person who is just involved in selling off the natural assets under the ground, but he is building stuff. So he's invested his money to create one of the largest cement companies in the region, or if not the largest. And he's involved in many other projects that are actually creating jobs and positive effects for the economy.
Okay, so this man is a business tycoon, and his name is Shadmanov.
Ulugbek Shadmanov.
Oh, okay. So you guys went to see him, and we're going to tell the story, but I want to just first start off with what actually happened. You and Mark Agnifilo, the lawyer, were in a hotel room with this gentleman, Shadmanov.
Yes.
In Dubai.
We weren't in a hotel room. We were actually in a villa. We had just stepped off the plane, the flight from New York. We didn't stop anywhere. We went directly to see him because he already knew at that point that something was brewing. And so he had called me, literally he, meaning Ulugbek, called me a day later, and he said, a day before, and he said, I need you guys to get on a plane and come see me.
Got it. So he calls you, you know him, again, one of the wealthiest guys in the region. He calls you personally, and he says, hey, get on a plane, come to Dubai. Within hours, you're on a plane to Dubai with Mark, the lawyer, to meet him. You get off the plane, you go right to the luxury villa where he is. You're having a meeting with him. Tell us what happened.
Yeah, so we're having a meeting and we're discussing the situation, which will, as you said, we can get into it, what the situation is. But at this point, we are having a conversation. We're sitting there being served endless cups of tea and, delicious dinner. So we're sitting there having a talk after a 16-hour flight. And all of a sudden, we hear very loud noises coming from outside of the compound and then inside the compound. And we are Mark and I are kind of looking at each other, what's going on. These are not the typical noises you expect to hear at 2 o'clock in the morning. Immediately after, or let's say 30 seconds after we first hear the noises, we see a person in a balaclava with a battering ram enter the villa, and then immediately behind him about 30 or 40 agents with police vests and balaclavas carrying. Mark later told me that they were Glocks. I personally wouldn't know, but she said they were Glocks. Pointed at every single person in the room, yelling at us for us to get on the floor, hands behind our back, which Mark and I wisely complied with. So we have then we're lying on the cement, not the cement, but the floor. And have 2 agents standing over us. Mark said, I kind of see a red dot jumping around me, and I'm just thinking and telling the agent, please stay focused, please, don't get nervous, stay on me, right? I'm sort of not thinking anything, and just certainly not the first time I've been in a situation like this, but doesn't make it more fun every time that it happens. And so we spent about 30 minutes on the floor. We hear commotion in the room. Then they handcuff Ulugbek and put him, as we were told later, in a car. But at that point, Mark and I are allowed to present our passports. They asked for our Dubai visas, which obviously we had. And, at that point, after we already understand that, okay, this part of the show is over, Mark says, look, I'm Ulugbek's attorney. I would like to know, why are you arresting him and where are you taking him? And to which the literal response that comes is, you guys are nobody here. We don't care. We know who you are, but we don't care. You did not see anything. Get on a plane and go back to your country. And that's pretty much a direct quote. And so we were let know in no uncertain terms that we were not welcome to stay there anymore, and we were being advised that it would be better for our health and safety, which is the reason that I have to appear, among many others, have to appear with a disguised voice on your show. We were let know better, don't talk about this to anyone.
They take him away, and what happened to him? What happens to him next?
So this is the part of the story which is really has the most relevance to your listeners. And by the way, Kevin, I want to say that the reason I'm talking to you is that I appreciate the courage that you have to bring stories like this to light. Because, as you said, this is not stuff that gets talked about anywhere in the traditional media. But this is really how things happen in the real world. And it takes brave people like you and audiences like yours who want to know the truth about how things work to bring the level of awareness in this world to a higher plane. So even at a great danger to myself, I want to talk about this and tell you what happens. The guy gets taken away. He gets thrown in prison, which, if you know anything about Dubai, is not a pleasant experience. Mark and I, obviously hire local counsel, and we expect that, his lawyers are going to be able to call the authorities and find out where Mark's client is and what is he being charged with. It is certainly not a common thing, as you know, for a normal person to be thrown in prison with no charges and not to be given access to his attorneys. But this is exactly what happens. We are told, or rather Ulubek's local lawyers at this point are told, we do not know of this person. He does not appear anywhere in our computers. The Ministry of Justice, the prosecutor's office, the police, the immigration authorities do not have this person in their system. We have a term for this, he was disappeared. And I want you to think about how chilling that is. Any person, even a person of great needs, somebody who is given and welcomed in a country such as the United Arab Emirates, can be disappeared in a matter of minutes. Nobody knows where he is. Nobody can talk to him. He is not given access to anyone, not the phone call to his attorney, nothing.
And by the way,
this is the kind of stuff.
And by the way, this just happened last week, didn't it?
It happened a month ago, but that doesn't matter. It happens every single day all around the world. This is not, like you said, an isolated incident. This is something that goes on a daily basis. And it doesn't only go on in countries such as the United Arab Emirates, it goes on everywhere.
So when the government wants you to disappear, you disappear.
They make it happen.
And it's every government, right?
It's every government. There is no exception that I know of. We have heard, and if you want proof, think about stories that are not from our not so distant history about what happened at Guantanamo, about the George Bush's efforts during the war against terror. But any person can be called a terrorist. It doesn't take much. There is not much burden of proof that has to take place. You can be classified as it's a check mark in the system. You get classified as a terrorist, you disappear. And it doesn't take much. It doesn't mean you have to have a bomb in your vest or something like that, right? It's you participated in a financial transaction that appears suspicious. That is enough. That is enough for you to be disappeared. And in this particular case, this guy, this is what I want you to understand. This guy was never charged with a crime. He was never given access to any normal due process that we expect in the civilized world. He was never taken through the court system. He was thrown about 2 weeks later. He was thrown on a private jet and flown back to Uzbekistan, where, for reasons we can discuss later, he's almost certainly facing the prospects of torture, illegal imprisonment, and so on and so forth. But Uzbekistan may be a place where we can expect for such things to occur. Certainly, when people think about Dubai, what do they think about? They think about the luxury cars, the 5- and 6-star hotels, the great restaurant scene. It's really become a mecca for the international business community. A lot of money is flowing into that country, and Uzbek was simply another investor until, as we learned later, the president of Uzbekistan, and this is what it's all about, the president of Uzbekistan, his family, are going after this guy's assets. They decided that he's getting too powerful, too wealthy, and has too much influence, and that he wasn't, and he's the kind of element they would like to disappear. And that's what they did. It takes one phone call from the president or his people to somebody high up in the government, in the royal family, in this case, of the UAE, and it's done as a favor to them, as one gentleman to another.
And it's all off the books. Again, there's no record. He was not given access to lawyers. He did not go through the court system. Even the flight that went from the United Arab Emirates, when they sent him back to Uzbekistan, that private plane, there's no record of that either, correct?
There is no record. It's a private flight. The passenger manifesto is altered. Nobody knows that we know, but we know because we have access. But if you were to go and check the flight registry, his name does not appear on any flight manifest. He was not there. For the 2 or 3 weeks that he was held in detention in Dubai, Uzbek was not there. He could have been thrown and buried in the desert, in the sand, and we would not know any better. Or at least there would be no public record. Again, we would know, but there's nothing. We are trying to bring this injustice to light. And again, this is just one example of many. This is not limited. I don't want your listeners to think, oh, well, it's that part of the world. This could never happen here. This could never happen to me, God forbid. Yes, it can.
So when people listen to politicians, can we trust what they're saying is accurate, or are these politicians knowingly giving us false information? And do they know that documents have been altered, destroyed, changed, or are they? Do they know?
So let me tell you a little story. This again, concerns this particular case, but I'm just using it as an example because this is the case that I've been assigned. Congressman Wellesley Hunt, certainly a well-known name, goes on the U.S. congressional floor in March of 2024 and
I actually have here a copy of the congressional record. So I have that document right here with the transcript of his speech.
So March 15th, 2024, Texas Representative Wellesley Hunt is saying that United Cement Group, which is the company that Ulugh owns, acquired Uzbekistan government stake in one of the country's largest cement factories in early 2022. And then Hunt goes on to claim that they were seeking monopolization under the guise of privatization to the benefit of Russia. So out of nowhere, a U.S. congressman, think about this, a U.S. congressman is talking about a medium-sized cement plant in Uzbekistan as somehow being a contributing enemy of the U.S. state, essentially, because we're fighting a proxy war in Ukraine. And so that this cement companies, medium, small-sized cement companies, certainly on a global scale, is somehow contributing to the war effort on behalf of Russia, and that the acquisition is somehow done on behalf of Russia. Now, I happen to know, and I believe you also have documents to show this, that the entire statement that Congressman Hunt made was fabricated based on information that he received from well-paid lobbyists. And that later those lobbyists were forced to issue an apology for presenting inaccurate information to a member of the U.S. government. Of course, that apology was never published. You have access to it, but it was never published. Certainly, Congressman Hunt never went back on the floor to say, you know what, I was misinformed, and he just relied on information that was bought and paid for, that was fabricated, that was provided to him by lobbyists who are bought and paid for. And again, this happens on a daily basis. If you think that the U.S. pharma industry, that the large defense contractors are not spending millions and billions of dollars to do the same thing on a daily basis, to misinform members of the government, members of Congress, and that, and certainly in some cases, the members of Congress and members of Senate aren't direct investors in those same companies. And so they're not only defending the so-called truth and justice, but they're defending their own pocketbooks. And when they go and lie, when they go and make statements which they know not to be true, it's done on purpose. I'm not saying that in this case, Congressman Hunt knew that this statement he was making that destroyed the reputation of a company, the reputation of a man who was then disappeared, that he knew necessarily that this was false information. But when you go on the floor of the U.S. Congress, shouldn't you at least check your facts? Wouldn't that be the kind of thing that a U.S. citizen would expect when their lawmaker goes on the floor and makes a statement, that they would check the things that they're saying before they say them? So ask yourself, is this the kind of representation that we as U.S. citizens want?
I actually do have in my hands right here the actual documents, registration forms that show all the documentation. And so, I don't know if this is top secret or classified, but this is all the documentation showing how these lobbyists are registered, how they're getting paid. And they're getting paid from the Uzbek government and other foreign governments to influence U.S. politicians, correct?
That is correct. Congressman Hunt asked for the Office of Foreign Asset Control, which is the part of the U.S. government which is supposed to investigate and enforce sanctions against companies that are the worst offenders. They're supposed to investigate the terrorists, the war profiteers, the money launderers, the drug traffickers. And instead, Congressman Hunt goes on the floor of the U.S. Congress and asks them to investigate a cement company, a company that is involved in building office buildings, residential complexes in Central Asia, a company that was shown beyond a shadow of a doubt to have no involvement with any military operations anywhere in the world, a company that was shown not to have any connections with Russia, a company that has in fact made a commitment to help with hopefully the reconstruction effort in Ukraine after the war is over. So why is a congressman who has great power talking about and asking Janet Yellen to investigate a mid-sized cement company in Uzbekistan? If that does not appear ridiculous to you, then I don't know what is.
In Dubai, this, again, 30 military people with guns, with their laser finders, the red dots everywhere, bust into the villa, guns drawn, aiming the guns at you and Mark and the individual here, Shadmanov, throwing you on the ground. I listened to a recorded phone call with Mark where he was explaining that the gun was pushed at the back of his head, where the guy was Mark was spread eagle on the floor, face down. The gun was pushed to the back of his head, and that little red dot was moving as the hand was moving around, as you said, and he got very, very nervous. They take the guy and take him away. This must have been headline news all over Dubai, correct?
It got zero press.
Wait. It had to be the lead story on TV news. It had to be front page news on the newspapers. This is a major arrest, a major military operation, and you're saying it got zero media coverage?
Zero media coverage. Nothing happened.
International businessman. What about the Financial Times, London Times? Any newspapers in Europe cover it?
No newspapers in Europe, no newspapers in the United States, no TV channel, no internet coverage. Nothing happened. This did not happen. Again, think about how many things never, just like this, more serious than this, with people actually being killed and disappeared forever, never happened.
There was a book written years ago called The Green Man and the Golden Girl, and it was about a gentleman who made a lot of money in the United States. He was an older guy, and he had a younger girlfriend, a blonde, the Golden Girl, and he was the Green Man because he had so much green money, and he went to a private island that he bought, and he had a little security force there, and he was just going to live his life in luxury. The United States government, for reasons described in the book, put together a secret military operation with helicopters. U.S. military went in, helicopters, guns blazing, killing it was something like in a James Bond movie where they took over the island where Dr. No was. I mean, they just went in there, shot the whole place up, brought him back, and it got zero media coverage. It, quote, never happened. This goes on in America. It goes on in England. It goes on all over the world, correct? I mean, you've been around this for many, many years. You're an insider. You know. So this is not new.
This is not new. This happens on a daily basis. The United Arab Emirates is not a so-called third world country. It is a member of every international organization you can think about, from the United Nations to the Interpol to International Criminal Court. It is supposed to be a first world country. It's not the kind of place where you would expect for things like this to happen. It is not the kind of country where people who get the golden visa expect to be treated like this and disappeared. But the bigger point is that we use this as an example just because it's a recent one that I am intimately involved with, but it is certainly not an isolated incident. And if you think things like this cannot happen in England, in the United States, in France, anywhere in the world, then I suggest you open up your eyes. I suggest you start looking and digging under the surface. I suggest you start listening to people like Kevin who are after the truth, who are not after the glossy feel-good story, who know on their own, based on their own life and experience, what a government with unlimited power, unchecked power, can do to you if they feel like it. Certainly, Kevin, knowing your story, you weren't treated any better. You were not, okay.
Yeah, well, as you know the story better than anyone. I mean, we've been friends for a long time, so you know. But what I told people, and I really didn't want to say it because people wouldn't believe it, and people would say, every major lawyer, whether it's every major lawyer on television, every legal scholar, when they looked at my case, they said, this is a kangaroo court. The rulings coming down from the judge are 100% wrong, and they're being upheld by the appeals court. How is this possible? This is mind-boggling. And the answer, which we've been talking about, is when these judges get phone calls from the big politicians in Washington, D.C., it doesn't matter what the law says. It just matters what they decide to say. Correct?
You are an unwanted element. You are a virus in the system, according to them. According to people like us who want to know the truth, you are the person telling the truth. You are someone who is committed to bringing a sense of unplugging people out of the matrix. That's what you do. And that is not what the matrix wants you to do. And that is why you lost. You didn't lose, but because you've always been a fighter, and you know in your soul that the cause you are fighting for is a just one. But certainly, as a person, as a writer, as a person who has exposed this kind of behavior for your entire career, you are an unwanted element. They couldn't disappear you, at least in the physical sense, but they disappeared you inside of a prison. They tried to silence you. They try to throw every possible trick in the book at you. You persisted, of course, because that's the kind of person you are, and we would not expect anything less of you. But many weaker men would have disappeared.
Let's talk about the media. How can you explain how it's possible that independent journalists who work for these media organizations, the New York Times, for example, they do stories about things like this that happen, international incidents or whatever. Washington Post certainly does. London Times certainly does. How is it that independent journalists, both CNN, CNN's a global news organization, how is it that they can be controlled and be told effectively, this story never happened and you can't talk about it?
Kevin, the concept of the independent media is the biggest lie, one of the biggest lies that we are being told, next to the concept of a free and fair justice system, next to the concept of a government which is by the people for the people, next to the concept of lawmakers who are passing laws in our interests. That is not what is happening, unfortunately. We want things and the world to look differently. We are being sold a story on a daily basis, and the people who are paying for it are the same people who are disappearing people they don't want. It is all a part of the same system. It is, what I referred to as just now as the matrix. It is all a part, and it is a powerful concept, because if you come to realize that the media, the government, the big corporate interests are all working not in your interests. They don't care about you. They don't care about me. They care about power and profit. That is the motive. Once you view the world as that kind of place, and you understand that this is how things work, and they don't have to work that way. You could, it certainly could be different, but that is not how it is. So when the media doesn't report a story which should be reported, which should be front page news, it's because they're busy reporting a story that their overlords want them to report. The same money interests who bought Congressman Hunt, who paid and at least asked for Ulugh Shadmanov to disappear inside of a dark prison cell with no records. It is all part of the same agenda. And this is not a conspiracy theory. This is not something that, quote unquote, the fringe is talking about, because that's the story, again, that we're being sold. Oh, this is just something the crazy people are talking about. Look at this nice senator. He cares about you. And it doesn't matter that he owns Kraft Foods and pharmaceutical companies in his portfolio. Don't ignore that. Ignore the fact that Jeff Bezos owns Washington Post, and all the other media outlets are owned by the same large corporations who are paying the lobbyists, who are setting the agenda for the governments around the world. Ignore that. Pretend that doesn't exist. Who do you think the media is truly serving? Do you think it's the public interest? I don't. I know it's not the case. Who do you think the governments and the lawmakers around the world are serving? Do you think it's the common man? You, me, our families? No.
It's the people who pay them.
When I was with President Gorbachev, we traveled together, and we were on a private plane, and we were talking about the media. He was the last president of the Soviet Union, and the Soviet Union had broken up at that point. And he was traveling, and I was with him, and his wife was alive at the time. Raisa, obviously, they both passed away. And we were talking about the media, and I said, what about, can you describe the state-run media, and we'll call it the authoritative regimes? In America, we say you can't believe any of the media in Russia or the Soviet Union back then because it's a state-run media. They only say what the government wants. Or North Korea, that's a state-run media. Or Iran, that's a state-run media. And he started laughing like a fool. And he said, America's media is a state-run media. Canada's media is a state-run media. Germany's media is a state-run media. He goes, every media around the world is controlled either by the politicians and or the corporate powers. That's what the message is. And he even went on to say that the KGB was embedded in the media that was in Russia. And he said that the CIA, which I knew, was embedded into the media in America. I mean, do you see it that way as well?
Of course. It's, again, if you start viewing the world from the lens of whenever you hear a story, don't just assume it's true. Ask yourself, whose interest does it serve? Whose pockets are being lined when the story comes out? Then you start seeing the truth. Then you start seeing elements of the truth. The intelligence community that you mentioned, the surveillance community, the crime-fighting community has immense power within the media in the so-called free world. This is not an isolated incident when we point our fingers at North Korea, Russia, China to a certain extent. I would argue that in a way it's more honest. At least we know that there, and nobody is making the pretense like we do in this country, that the media isn't bought and paid for by special interests, by the government, by the intelligence community. We are led to believe in the myth of a free and fair and objective media, and that, in a way, is much more dangerous than because so many people turn on CNN and think they're seeing the truth. They think the stories that are breaking are objective reality. And in fact, it's nothing more than the story that they want you to hear. And as the dark side of that concept is the real story, the one they don't want you to know about. And that's a phrase I'm borrowing from a certain person known as Kevin Trudeau. But that's exactly the case. There is a story they don't want you to know about, and it's buried underneath the story, the feel-good story or the feel-bad story, because so much of the news we're seeing is made to scare us and terrify us. But these are not the things we should be terrified about. What we should be terrified about is the stuff that's never told. The kind of things I'm telling you now.
There's a phrase called parasitical elite class. And the parasitical elite class, I did not coin that phrase. Another friend of mine did. Really accurately describes people in powerful positions who really don't add any value to society, but they're the parasites. They live off the production of others. And greed for money, power, and control is beyond most people's comprehension. In this particular case that you're a part of, and you were physically there when it happened, you were thrown on the ground. The gun was put to the back of your head. This is not something you know about. It's something you know. The individual who has a cement company who's worth a lot of money, again, one of the largest in the region, not in the world, but in the region, the president of Uzbekistan effectively decides, I want some more money. And correct me if I'm wrong. I'm just going to paint a picture here. The president of Uzbekistan says, I want some more money. So whose business can I just take over? And is that kind of the reason? I understand he had a couple daughters involved too. Is there some bizarre, almost Game of Thrones type of real story that's going on here in real life?
That is a perfect parallel, because that is the reason that Game of Thrones resonated so much, is because on some level, we know that the Game of Thrones is not a fairy tale. It's not fiction, it's reality. And in this particular, or at least it's a representation of reality that's much closer to what happens in the world than what you see on CNN. In this particular case, there is a very complicated story going on in Uzbekistan, which is about power, transition of power. There are family clans that are involved, and power goes hand in hand with money. So in order to, the current president isn't going to last forever, but certainly he would like someone who protects his business interests, protects his agenda, to be the next in power. And that's where his daughters come in. But in order to have access to power, you need to have access to resources. You need to have access to lobbying organizations, to other politicians who become your speaking heads. You need, again, access to the media. You need access to be able to buy the U.S. lobbying interests and the U.S. government, as we can clearly see with Representative Hunt and his statements. So this is at the bottom of it all. This story is about the same old thing: power and money. This was nothing, and is, because I want your listeners to understand, Shadmanov wasn't sent back home and let go. He is inside their prison systems. He's being investigated and quite possibly tortured right now. Do you know what charge they brought against him? Maybe it's murder. Maybe it's something, drug smuggling. No, he's being charged with illegal crossing of the border.
You mean like 20 million, like 20 million people did in America when they came across the southern border that are in America right now? 20 million people illegally crossed the border.
Exactly, except that this guy was running for his life. Unlike the 20 million people who are coming into this country just looking for a better life, and I can't blame them, but let's just, well, this guy was literally running for his life.
Has he had access
That's why he thought.
Has he had access to a lawyer since he's been in Uzbekistan prison?
He currently has access to his lawyer, but for the only reason that the place where he's being detained is monitored with cameras, and it's a public, well-lit place. He's scheduled at any moment to be transferred to a much more clandestine facility, one that certainly we know he will be tortured in, he will be denied access to his attorneys, and that he will probably be forced to surrender his assets. That's the agenda.
So that's what they want. They've only charged him with illegally crossing the border. which he's innocent of. He
That is correct.
He didn't illegally cross the border. Are you still there? Okay, we just lost Mr. X. I hope he's okay, because this could be monitored, and maybe they were tracing the call. So Trey is going to try to get him back on the line, and I'm hoping that he's physically okay, because he's doing a big risk to do this show and exposing what he's exposing. I think we're getting him right now. Do we have him back? Okay, Mr. X, are you still there?
I'm here.
Okay, I was
Yes.
thinking, maybe they're tracing the call, and I was a little bit concerned about your safety and well-being, but you're okay.
So far, yes.
Good. So we were talking about the fact that this guy has been officially charged with illegally crossing the border, which is a misdemeanor. It's not a crime, but they have 30 agents come in and take him away. He disappeared. He's completely out of the system. And now he's in a maximum security prison in Uzbekistan. He's going to be transferred to a place where he's not going to have access to lawyers, probably tortured. His associates have been tortured. That's been documented. We don't know if he's going to be charged with something else. He probably will, and he'll probably be found convicted, but he's probably been given an opportunity. And the opportunity is, give us your money, transfer all your assets, and we'll let you go, correct?
He, as far as I know, and certainly at this point, my access to him is limited. But as far as I know, this opportunity has not yet been presented to him. But that is the common scenario. That is what we're expecting.
That's the common scenario. And you say common, this is how it works.
This is how it works. This is how it works around the world. And again,
And the reason it works, and there was a great book written, Why the Innocent Plead Guilty, is Joseph Stalin's prosecutor is well known for saying, show me the man and I'll show you the crime. Meaning governments around the world can charge anybody, and this is in America, Canada, Germany, England, anywhere. Governments around the world, they can pick a person, just pick them randomly, and they will be able to charge that person with crimes and get convictions. Correct?
This is correct. And I know that you have read the book, I believe 3 Crimes a Day it's called, or 3 Felonies a Day.
Yeah, 3 felonies a day.
Which demonstrates in a very convincing way that the average American citizen commits 3 felonies a day. Our criminal code is so extensive that literally, like you said, any person, pick one at random, throw a dart, can be, with the right amount of attention, and it's not much, be charged and convicted of a crime. And if this can be done in the United States, where we're supposed to have the most free and fair justice system in the world, just imagine what can happen in other places where they don't even pretend to have a free and fair justice system.
What do you think is going to happen to Shadmanov?
We are fighting for him. We launched a petition on change.org to bring attention to his predicament. We are hoping that the advocates of truth, like yourself, will not let this go unnoticed. We are hoping that, and this is the only way to get the Uzbek government to treat him fairly. And we are not saying let him go immediately. Well, we are, but because we are convinced that he has not committed any crime. But if the Uzbek government has evidence of a crime, then by all means, take it to court, let the judge decide whether he's committed a crime. We are confident that he has not. And unfortunately, in the real world, what's most likely to happen is that unless we get his story out there, and again, this is one of many, I don't want you to think that just because I am personally focused on this story, there aren't hundreds or thousands of stories just like this or worse going on around the world right now.
Yeah, there's probably tens of thousands when you look at the CIA secret prisons all around the world as well.
Probably. You're probably unfortunately correct. But, we can't change the entire world. We can try to change the world one person at a time. And I am focused on this one. I want this to serve as an example, as a proxy. And I appreciate you bringing your listeners' attention to this story and for taking an interest yourself. But this is representative of what goes on every day. Don't be fooled. Don't be misguided. If we don't put pressure on the government, and again, the only way to create pressure is to threaten their status in the world. That is the only thing that the government is realistically worried about, is how will they be seen? How will they be perceived? Are U.S. companies going to continue doing business with them in light of the human rights violations? Is the U.S. government going to notice and wag their finger and say, you are being bad boys? Or is this just going to be another story that gets buried, that gets disappeared, just like the person, and he is either tortured, disappeared forever, or is forced to give up the wealth that he has legitimately built with his hard work. And this is important because in that part of the world, most people make money by selling access to natural resources, importing people, or simply just by stealing. There are very few people who are actually taking the time and putting their own money and effort and energy into building a business from the ground up. Shadmanov is one of those people. And they don't like that because that breaks the model. When you have 100, 1,000 at most influential people in the country, and all of those people are dirty, I'm going to use that word, then to have one clean person in their midst doesn't look good for them. So unfortunately, unless we can bring attention, the global attention, to this travesty, I don't have any positive expectations for the future.
Well, the only positive expectation I think that we can maybe hope for is that individual people, especially those listening to the show, have an increase in consciousness and awareness so that they can use discernment when they're listening to politicians and primarily when they're getting information from news sources, whether it's alternative news sources, the mainstream media, the internet, et cetera, et cetera. Look, everybody, use discernment. You're not getting accurate information. You're getting information that is manipulated. You're being generally misled. You're being specifically fed a line that they, quote, they want you to believe for their own purposes of power control and money. Mr. X, I appreciate you coming on. I'm going to ask you in the future to come on again to share additional insights from your global insider perspective, if you are good with that. I do know, and I just received this morning right before the show, that Mark is going to, he's the lawyer that was actually there with you in the room with Shadmanoff when the 30 paramilitary people came in. He is putting out a press release today. So this is documented, folks. This is absolutely 100% documented and substantiated, and an official press release from one of the top 3 criminal defense lawyers in the United States is coming out today, who was physically there. And again, Mr. X, who is on with us, was physically there as well. I appreciate you coming on. I hope we're going to be increasing awareness of this, maybe get the conversation going. We are breaking the story here. This is the first outlet anywhere in the world that I know of that's even talking about this. I don't think any news outlet, no newspapers, magazines, internet feeds, AP is not covering it. I don't believe it's been on anybody's podcast. We are the absolute first breaking this story. It is a breaking story. We are breaking it. A press release is going out tonight from the lawyer. We'll see if anybody picks up on it. But hopefully we can increase awareness of this and get this gentleman and the tens of thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of other people that are just being disappeared and treated unfairly. I was one of them. Maybe in time we'll have more transparency and legitimacy with the media and the judicial systems around the world. But it's an uphill battle, isn't it?
Kevin, with people like you on the story, I truly think of you as a beacon of light. I truly think you are one of the very few people who are dedicated to the truth, who have dedicated your life to telling the real story, who have made immense personal sacrifices. And I don't want to mention them on air, but I want your listeners to know that you have paid a very dear price for your commitment and for your principles. And I thank you for that. And I know many people, many of my colleagues, they may not have the courage to come on air and express the sentiment, but privately feel the same way. And so it's only by having people like you who have the courage to stand up against the system, to go against the grain, and to, at a great risk to your own personal well-being and security. You didn't have to do any of this. You could have settled the case, the unjust case that was brought against you. You could have been living a life of pure luxury, and nobody would have blamed you. I wouldn't have blamed you. I don't think any of your listeners would have. But you chose the hard road. You chose the road of truth. And at the end of the day, that is, people like you are the reason that even hardcore cynics like me still hold out some hope. You know, I've seen too much, I've experienced too much, and sometimes I do feel like people like Shadmanov have no hope of fair treatment. But as long as we have voices of truth and beacons of light like you covering the story, there is hope for him and there is hope for all of us.
Well said. I appreciate you coming on. I will have you on again. I know my listeners are going to love this. So thanks for being my guest. If you're watching the show right now, make sure you like this video. Make sure you share this video. Get this all over the internet. Share this with everybody you know. Share it on all your different social media feeds. Leave a comment. If you liked this interview and you want more like this, leave a comment and leave comments on other people's comments so we can increase our algorithm. This is limitless. You are limitless. Just increase your awareness and consciousness. This is the Kevin Trudeau Show. I'm Kevin Trudeau. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.